December 24th, the North Pole. What do you mean the reindeer are sick? I'm afraid they've come down with reindeer cold. They all have coughing fits and stuffy red noses. Even Rudolph? Especially Rudolph. So, how will this affect the big night? Well, the reindeer can still fly, but we don't want to overexert them. They can take you to the cities, but from there, I think you're going to need to get from chimney to chimney by yourself. How do you propose I do that? You could try jumping. I'm a jolly fat man. I think you overestimate my physical ability. Nevertheless, the kids need their toys. I'll do it. There's one more problem this year. What's that? The humbugs. What? The humbugs. They hate Christmas and anything joyful. We think they intend to stop you from delivering presents, so that's why we've packed your bags with something special this year. Meet the Haldecker 3000. It can fire high-speed Christmas ornaments at any humbug trying to stop you. Very good. I hope that these humbugs don't offer me any trouble. Humbugs. Whatever. On December 22nd, 2007, Nate Bradley, aka Andor00, esteemed developer of Secret Agent Dorito, uploaded Twas the Night to the Yo-Yo Games sandbox. Like Garden Gnome Carnage, it was a submission for the Yo-Yo Games Competition 01, which had a winter theme. Although Twas the Night did not take any of the top prizes for the competition, its unique pre-rendered art style and charming humor has made it a standout in my mind all these years later, and since it's an appropriate time of year, let's dive in. After the opening cutscene, a beautiful title plays, showing Santa and his reindeer leaving the North Pole. Santa, the Slaydar is detecting humbugs all around us. Right then. Reindeer, prepare evasive maneuvers. The game begins with us using the arrow, or WASD keys, to pilot the sleigh through the humbug-ridden storm. This is the first of 3 different sub-games that make up Twas the Night's gameplay, but this one takes up the least time by far, so I won't dwell on it too long. You dodge the bugs and wait out the clock until you reach your destination. That's pretty much it. One nice touch here, though, is that we can track our progress on a map that pops up periodically on the lower right corner as an Indiana Jones-esque dotted line plots our route from the North Pole down to the suburbs, our first location. And before long, we arrive there and enter the second subgame of Twas the Night, the platforming section. Alright, it's present time! Here, we use the arrow or WASD keys to move around and jump, and quickly find an instruction sign, which will be a familiar sight to all those who've watched my Secret Agent Dorito video. Well, that was nice of me. Soon we encounter a trampoline, which makes this absolutely delightful sound effect. As we make our way through the level, we are introduced to more elements, such as spikes, falling icicles, and Christmas lights we can climb across. Finally, we reach a chimney and tap down to enter it. Within the houses, we encounter the third and final subgame of Twas the Night, the stealth section. These will grow more complex over time, but they start out simple enough. Avoid the view of adults walking around the house, eat the cookies, and deliver the presents at the tree. Delivering the presents is a little mini-game in itself, where you tap the corresponding mouse button to deliver a naughty, or nice present, where messing up will stun you temporarily. This is a non-issue now, but later on, when people start patrolling the tree, it will become highly important to be able to do this quickly and without errors. Here, though, we can easily complete the delivery and sneak back out of the fireplace. Entering the second platforming level, we finally encounter one of the primary antagonists of the game, a humbug. These basic brown ones can be dispatched with a jump on the head, like a common Goomba, but not all of them will be defeated so easily. Later on in the level, we tangle with our first green humbug, who all wear hard hats and are immune to being jumped on. Since we don't have any ammo for the Haldecker 3000 yet, we are forced to just run away from this one. Luckily, he falls in this hole, like a chump. After this, we enter our second stealth house, which introduces a bigger layout that we can pan around with the mouse. Other than that, it's similar to the first though, just having 2 guards instead of 1. Cookies, presents, and we're out. In the next platforming section, we'll find some Christmas ornaments to use as ammo for the Haldecker, and have the opportunity to finally pwn some newts, to defeat some green humbugs. Frustratingly, this weapon only has a 5-shot ammo maximum, so my natural ammo hoarding tendencies are somewhat stymied in this game. Nevertheless, I persist. House 1-3 introduces children, who are just faster humans with smaller vision cones. In general, with these stealth sections, the controls are really smooth, but the collision physics on the walls are always a bit sticky, and this can make it much more frustrating than it should be to smoothly navigate the areas, and just make the game feel worse than it really should. In the next platforming section, we are introduced to ice patches, which you would think cause you to have lowered friction, slower movement maybe, but no, you just die. You just slip and fall off the building and die. Realism? Later on in the level, we find a candy cane, and this actually fundamentally alters the way in which the platforming sections work. It allows us to slide down power lines, which is fine, it's a cool new element, but what it actually does is gives us access to a melee weapon that we can use against the humbugs even when the Halldecker is out of ammo. By right-clicking anywhere on the screen, we do this nice little spin attack, and we can take out the helmet bugs and normal ones. It's just generally really useful. Although... Okay, so Twas the Night doesn't bind the cursor to the game window, but the cursor is invisible when you're not wielding the Halldecker or in a house or a menu. So basically you'd better hope that when you right-click your cursor, it's somewhere within the window, but hidden, because if it turns out to be actually somewhere else on the screen, you'll just click out of the game window. The controls will lock up, but the game will keep running, and you'll just look like a chump. This happened to me several times while recording footage for the game. If you can get past that, though, it's a useful new tool for our arsenal, and finally we can mow down every humbug in our paths. We are truly What's that, you say? Oh, they immediately introduce a new red humbug who's specifically immune to the candy cane and the Halldecker and can only be killed by jumping on its head? Ah well, nevertheless. House 1-4 is the first one where the paths of the human guards intersect with the tree, so we have to be fast when delivering the presents, and any errors cost us dearly. Still, with a bit of skill and practice, we're able to complete our mission and move on. In the next platforming section, we are introduced to lampposts, which allow us to swing around and launch ourselves onwards at great speed. Not bad for a fat man. Soon after, we find our first pair of ice skates. These allow us to cross ice unharmed, as well as crush the skulls of the hard hat humbugs with ease. They don't work on spikes, though. We enter the final house in Sector 1 and are introduced to a crucial new element in the stealth level. Stakes. No, not that kind either. What I mean is, from here on out, you'll only have 3 tries to pass each house. Now, this doesn't kill you or return you to the last save or anything, rather, once you fail 3 times, you're just kicked out of the house and you can move on with the game. This is a unique and intriguing mechanic that stops you from getting stuck in a specific stealth level, but also rewarding the best players with a better score at the end of the run. And yes, this statistic is recorded and shown to you once you beat the game. It's a little annoying though, and I'll get into why later on. Because I like you, here's a pro tip. The order of the presents to be delivered as a series of right and left clicks does not change between attempts, or even between playthroughs, so if you're attentive, you can memorize the pattern and get deliveries done very quickly. This would make for a good speedrunning strat. I presume, I don't have time to do that bit for this one. In the next platforming section, we're introduced to another optional collectible, presents. These can be found tucked away in the platforming levels, and again contribute to your score at the end of the game. As we continue on though, better run! We flee the giant humbug, jumping chasms and killing enemies to escape the mega-sized menace. Why, it's hard to even imagine a humbug bigger than this one. Luckily, with a bit of luck, we can finally reach the right side of the screen and safety. Having completed the suburbs, it's time to fly again, and we make our way on towards the Poor District. This flying section is a bit more difficult than the first one we played, with the bugs being more numerous. There are 3 primary types of flying humbug that we have to evade in these sections. The brown bugs move in a sine wave pattern, but are relatively slow speed and easy to avoid. The green hard hat bugs, on the other hand, move in a straight line, but slightly angled up or down, and can therefore interfere with your dodging if they intersect with a brown bug. Finally, the red humbugs come barreling straight down the screen right at you at high speed. These are the ones that usually end up getting me, just because I'm so focused on weaving through the intersecting patterns of the others, I don't see them until it's too late. Still, with a bit of luck, we can make it through the night and finally arrive on the rougher side of town. The Port District drops us off a roof right away into a platforming section. Because of the rundown condition of the houses here, we are introduced to crumbling blocks, which will hold for a second, then collapse underneath our weight. Quick shout out here to the way that the falling icicles, when you're getting near them but not quite under, will quiver and tremble about to fall. It's a very nice little detail. Anyway, we grab some ice skates just before entering the first house of the level. 2-1 doesn't have any big new elements introduced, though it is a little large for the Poor District, just a standard excursion of grabbing the heavily surveilled cookies and delivering the presents before dodging back to the fireplace. The next platforming section relies on trampolines and has this little mini puzzle of figuring out which blocks to collapse to be able to get the present while still being able to get back up top to continue. Luckily, the blocks do regenerate after a short time, so if we mess up, it's not the end of the world. Unless it is. After this, we are introduced to a new and especially devious type of enemy, gunner bugs. These guys not only shoot a literal cannon at you, but they're also red bugs, so they can't be harmed by long-range ornament attacks from the Hulldecker 3000. You have to figure out how to close the distance and jump on their heads instead. This is made slightly easier by the fact that, if you time it exactly right, you can bounce off the top of their cannonballs and not take any damage. It's tricky though. One clever design choice that I appreciate a lot is that if you take any damage at all while wearing these ice skates, they fall off. It's like a Mario power-up or something. What this means practically is that you're rewarded for dodging all the danger in a level, because later sections of that level become easier by having slippery ice that you no longer have to dodge, or hard hat bugs that you can now stomp. It's a nice little way to create a more rewarding experience for the most skillful players. House 2-2 has an interesting design. It's got a heavily protected perimeter hallway patrolled by the speedier children, with one slower adult around the tree, and then perimeter rooms that are much safer hiding places. After clearing this house, the next section has a pretty sticky fight with a bunch of humbugs at once, then we get to this complex parkour section with lampposts and trampolines, and finally we can get to House 2-3. For the first time this sector, we're introduced to a new stealth mechanic, that being ornaments. These are strewn around the floor and, when stepped on, summon the attention of nearby enemies. This is not always a death sentence though, as the guard will usually check out the site of the disturbance, then return to their post without searching further. This may come in handy later. In the next platforming section, we find maybe my favorite section in the entire game. I always love it when a game synergizes its elements together in clever new ways, and this is a great example of that. At the beginning of the section, we find a pair of ice skates, and then immediately enter a long tunnel blanketed in ice. This means practically that if we take any damage at all, we will immediately slip on the ice and die. It makes for a particularly high stakes and thrilling section of sudden death combat and platforming, all using the already existing mechanics to enforce it. It's very clever. After clearing this and saving, we are introduced to a brand new platforming mechanic, sparks that run the climbing Christmas lights and force us to navigate between different layers of lights in order to dodge them. On the very next screen, we get another new mechanic, pushable crates that can be used for platforming. These are fine, but are never used in a particularly innovative way. It's almost always just push a crate a few feet, then use it to jump onto a ledge or something. It seems like there was a good amount of potential for cool synergy here, and it feels like a bit of a missed opportunity. Later on in the level, we encounter a complex section of trampolines and flying humbugs with a present well hidden up in a corner, and then, after some lamppost shenanigans, we enter 2-4. This house brings us a guard statically staring at the tree, leaving it impossible for us to deliver any presents. As you may have guessed, the trick here is to intentionally step on an ornament, making a sound to lure them away, then quickly delivering the presents before the guard loops back around to the tree to resume their silent vigil. After grabbing the cookies, we can return to the fireplace and make our sweet escape. The next section begins with us having to chain hop off the heads of these static flying red bugs before pushing this crate a few feet to get on a ledge, and then taking on these easy brown humbugs. After that though, we find two cannoneer bugs placed annoyingly out of reach, so we can't take them down, and we're forced to complete the following parkour section dodging constant cannonballs. This consists of not only a climbing section with Christmas lights, but also this complex ladder-based climbing part, including many moving red humbugs that we can't really get enough vertical momentum to kill, all while still dodging cannonballs. Finally, we make it to the next screen. Here we encounter a welcome ally. Our reindeer Blitzen is apparently feeling well enough to help us out a bit, allowing us to mow over enemies, jump higher, and move faster. Hopping on his back, we can fairly well breeze through the next section, tearing through humbugs like so much wrapping paper. He's even cannon-proof. Unfortunately, after clearing most of the level, we encounter an obstacle that Blitzen cannot surmount, the indomitable ladder. Leaving him behind, we continue on to the last house of the section. House 2-5 introduces yet another stealth-based obstacle, dogs. These act essentially the same as humans, but if we are caught by them instead of an auto game over, they simply bark, summoning a human guard in a similar manner to the ornaments. Immediately, we find a human with his eyes trained unflinchingly on the cookies, so we need to intentionally set off one of the dogs in order to lure him away and gather our treats. The next section too has a dog patrolling, along with two humans, one of whom passes the tree often, so it takes a bit of slick execution in order to pass the next part. After making our delivery and sneaking back to the chimney, we escape. As we enter the next platforming section, we are immediately beset by the giant humbug again, and we have to flee from it on a parkour course of all the new elements we've encountered, including many falling blocks, and actually that's kind of it. The crates, the reindeer, the cannoneers, and the Christmas light sparks aren't used at all. Oh well. We're quickly shuffled into the sleigh and begin our arduous flight to our final destination, the inner city. As we begin the flight, we can see that morning is imminent from the golden glow peeking above the horizon. Christmas night is almost over, our task almost complete. Almost. The final location of the game starts with a wide zoom in on our position on the inner city rooftop. Wordlessly, we set out to complete our mission. This area contains all the elements we've been introduced to in the poor part of town, including crumbling blocks and cannoneer bugs, but quickly introduces us to a new element, air vents. These cause us to float above them in the air slowly, which makes them slightly more tricky to navigate than the regular trampolines, as with those, you don't have to remain in the airstream to be propelled upwards. After getting the hang of this, we navigate a section of swinging from multiple lampposts with the correct timing to dodge patrolling flying bugs, and then enter this section where we have to defeat several more in a vicious brawl before scaling a tall, sprawling net of Christmas lights plagued by bugs and sparks before finally reaching the chimney and entering our first house. 3.1 is nothing super notable in terms of level design, and it doesn't introduce any new elements, so we can just grab the cookies, quickly deliver the presents, and sprint back to the fireplace without being caught a single time. Piece of cake. Fresh out of the chimney, we chain jump on several bugs' heads in order to get to a power line and have to collect this particularly tricky present, which requires precisely managing our momentum off the lamppost in order to not overshoot, then getting off the crumbling block as soon as possible and onto the ladders. After finally pulling this off, we are introduced to our final type of humbug adversary, and the most annoying by far. These are yellow bugs that roll back and forth and are immune to damage while in motion. You can attack or shoot them while they're unrolled, but this happens for a very short amount of time per cycle, and I got fed up with these little buggers pretty quickly after they were introduced. After dealing with an initial crop of these, we go through a genuinely impressive series of bug and trampoline jumps and finally make it to the next screen. Here we are introduced to ledges, which are basically just narrow jump-through platforms that allow us to more easily scale buildings. The most useful thing about these, actually, is that while standing atop one, you can tap the down key to drop through the platform. This comes in useful in this section where we have to descend past a spark roaming a bare power line in order to get down here and kill a couple humbugs before going right back up. Do a little platforming, a little bug stomping, and finally we arrive at our next house. 3.2 has a lot of complex moving parts. The upper section of the map contains a kitchen and the cookies, and there are multiple intersecting patrol routes assigned to this area that require you really keep on your toes. The bottom section, on the other hand, is a series of narrow hallways and rooms, each with different adversaries with different patterns. The first two sections are children, circulating with distinct but easily learned patterns. Then at the very bottom, there is only one human, with his gaze trained firmly on the wall, but multiple dogs engaging in different patterns that must be avoided in order to not tip off the human. Once we can figure out all the moving parts of this level, we can grab the cookies, make it through the bottom section, deliver the presents, and then do it all again in reverse and escape through the chimney. The next platforming section introduces moving cloud platforms that we can jump on. These are okay in principle, but they're designed with a personal pet peeve of mine. That is, there are invisible points where the platforms turn around, which makes it very annoying and unpredictable to jump between them without knowing when or where exactly the platform is going to suddenly change trajectory and scotch the jump. I think more games should go the jumper route and just have a little dot on the screen to represent the place where the platforms reverse, because without the visual feedback, this section is actually very annoying. After this section, we reach a chasm that seems impossible to get across. There's even a cannoneer bug across it shooting at us. Will our troubles ever end? You see, this is what I'm talking about. After this section, we are introduced to a final new element, these weird corkscrew platform things. When jumped on, these spin and move forward, but quickly lose momentum, meaning we have to continue hopping on them to maintain forward movement. They're okay. The next section is a very tricky challenge of first descending into a bit between two buildings, navigating between clouds and dodging sparks, humbugs, and ultimately ice at the bottom, then climbing back up a series of ledges with all the same plaguing us. This took me several tries before I was finally able to fight my way back up to the top of the building and enter the chimney to the next house. 3-3 is a massive layout, starting with some standard patrols but quickly leading us to a hallway of nooks and crannies, and then a heavily patrolled room littered with Christmas ornaments with the cookies, and another room entirely with the tree. To level with you, I could never actually beat this one. I lost all 3 lives and got bypassed on it both times I played this game all the way through for this video. After this humiliating failure, the next platforming section has a whole mess of cannon bugs, so we must weave through the flying cannonballs in order to deal with them all before boarding a moving platform and finding ourselves on the ledge of a building. Well, I could jump down recklessly to see what's down there, but I think I'll take the old cautious safe approach and just drop down to... what the hell? After figuring out the exact angle with which to jump down at in order to hit the trampoline and not die immediately, we have to fight several yellow humbugs aided by a cannoneer. The cannoneer is a real wise guy too. He'll literally stop shooting and wait for you to get in front of the cannon before starting again, just so you can't get a rhythm for it. It's so rude. After finally reaching a save point, we do some fancy parkour stuff, move another pointless crate, and go on a bit of a side quest for some more optional present collectibles before scaling a ladder to the chimney and entering 3-4. While playing this level, I think I realized what the major flaw with the stealth in this game is. There's no real way to get an overview of the map. Some houses start with a zoomed out view and then pan in, and some of them we can look around with the mouse, but if the house is big enough, we're going into it completely blind and unaware of what possibly exists, where possible exits, patrols, and safe zones might be. Because we have limited lives, it's very difficult to memorize the patrol positions within 3 run-throughs, and so it's so much harder than it should be to clear these houses because the patrols are entirely unpredictable in their movement when you're encountering them for the first time. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it's thrilling to hide in a corner, banking on the patrol turning a certain direction and hoping that they won't see you, but the limited tries kind of ruins this, because you can't truly trial and error the thing until you memorize the layout and all the patrols and safe spots. I think if the game just made the 3 tries thing optional and simply allowed us to bypass the level after 3 failures, as not to stick people on a difficult stealth mission, that would fix the issue. Alternatively, if you really wanted to keep the high-stakes 3 lives system, which I praised earlier, maybe start every level with a zoomed-out overview for a few seconds so you can at least grasp the layout of the level and where you're going. I don't know exactly how to fix it, and of course the game's almost old enough to drive now, so it's a moot point, but from a design perspective I like to try and diagnose the failures of the system and figure out how they might best be fixed. Anyway, I beat this one in 2 tries. It was actually pretty fun. After emerging from this house, the elf tells us that he's upgraded our Halldecker 3000 to full auto, as well as giving it unlimited ammunition.
Santa has something very special in his sack for you two.
This comes in useful immediately when we encounter a giant horde of humbugs and have to brawl it out in order to survive. Further up the building, we encounter this really annoying section where we have to fight 2 yellow bugs at once after getting off a ladder, and eventually I just jumped on this one until he fell down a hole and then ran away. On the next screen, we encounter our old adversary, the giant humbug, and he begins chase in earnest. This boss level does incorporate the newest elements we've been introduced to, including the air vents, the yellow humbugs, and Blitzen. After escaping, we are forced to leave Blitzen behind as we enter the final house. 3-5 is another maze-like structure that could really use with an overview so I could figure out what the heck I'm supposed to be doing before plunging in, but it's a little easier to navigate than some of the previous levels, as it's a pretty linear series of corridors and rooms without too many wide open spaces to get confused in. I had some really close calls, but I was eventually able to clear the level without actually being caught even one time. It makes me even madder that I lost 3-3 because I was so close to getting a perfect execution on all the houses. Ah well, nevertheless. After escaping, we enter the next screen where our elf is waiting. Phew, we're finally done. This was probably the toughest year yet, but it was worth it. What was that? Run! The final boss level starts with a slow vertical scroll as we have to escape the prying claws of the enormous humbug. We have to push the crate to get onto a ledge, big surprise, and then cross some Christmas lights to get to a trampoline. After reaching solid ground again, the screen stops rising, and the humbug sends in a swarm of green hard hat humbugs to take us out. After we've dispatched these minions, the level turns into a sidescroller, where we must avoid the pincer attacks of the giant irritable insect. Soon, debris starts tumbling from the sky that we have to dodge on top of everything else, and then finally, a water tower emerges from the right side of the screen, which we are prompted to shoot. Still dodging rocks from above, we pound the water tower with ornaments until finally it falls, dragging down the enormous humbug with it. The town is presumably plunged into drought, and Christmas is saved. December 25th. Presents! What did Santa get you this year? I got eggs. Hey, I got a beard trimmer. What kind of present is that? Uh-oh. After the credits, we are granted a score based on how well we did in the game. This is calculated by how many of the optional presents we got and how many of the houses we completed without losing all our lives. As you can see, I was maddeningly close to 100%, but I failed that one house. Performing well unlocks cheats that we can use in the main game using the number keys, with lower ranks only unlocking the lower numbered cheats. Cheat 1 is low gravity, which allows you to leap high into the air. Cheat 2 is Super Gun, which grants you the upgraded Halldecker 3000 early. Cheat 3 is Ice Skates, which just spawns in a pair of ice skates above your head. Cheat 4 is Reindeer, which summons Blitz into your side. And after a little bit of dabbling in the legal gray area of decompilation, I found that Cheat 5 is Super Speed, which lets you zoom around. Twas the Night is a fun, charming game that balances the platforming and stealth elements surprisingly well, despite a few hiccups that I noted along the way. Android 00's signature pre-rendered graphics look as great as ever, and the sounds and music in the game are very charming, if a little grating on extended listening. Like with Secret Agent Dorito, which I covered before, the game's story is humorous and has a funny little twist ending. It's just an all-around good time. After Secret Agent Dorito and this game, Android 00 made one more really iconic game that I am for sure going to cover in the future. But in the meantime, I want to wish everybody out there in YouTube land a happy holidays. I'll be working hard on more videos in the new year, but until then, thank you for watching. And I'll see you in the next one.